Hey, what's up? We should be live. Hey, Sue, how are you doing? So, thank you so much for being here, everyone. Today's bit of a special live stream, an unusual hour for me, an unusual day as well. So, basically, I said that I would convert, possibly, optionally, some videos into live streams instead, just because it gives us more time to interact and it's actually less work for me in terms of, editing the video afterwards and so on. So I thought it would be cool to just add another one and do this, even though I know maybe there will be fewer participants. As always, you can watch this one after the fact. Let me switch over to my face. As always, you can watch this after the fact. You don't have to watch it live. I'm just going to open up the stream on my phone so that I can see some of your comments. Let me see here. Will I see my own stream in the suggestions? Of course not. Let's go to the channel. There we go. Awesome. I'll mute myself so we don't all hear me. So thank you so much, Sue, for being here. Yvonne says, watching 4 a.m. for me. Amazing. So we ended up also having maybe some people who watch super duper late. I want to shut down some stuff. Let me see here. Just give me 1 second. I want to make sure the computer runs fast because it has quite a lot of processes simultaneously. Did a workout, started the day like that, which is always fun. Let me just check. Here we go. So we have the special Aussie stream, that's how I call it, but of course everyone's welcome. Yeah, so as I suspected, the pictures I want to share with you are huge, so I'm going to make them smaller so that they don't super slow down the live stream. But in any case, yeah, I hope you're doing well. Let me know where you're from and what time it is there. It's interesting for me because, again, I barely do these streams this time of day. So it's actually going to be interesting to see how many people there are and if the time is relevant. And then we can definitely do more of these for sure. I do want to make sure that I cater to everyone at some point, So if all you get are live streams that are in the middle of the night, hey, May Road, Madrid, hi from Spain. Yeah, so awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm happy that this time suits Europe as well. Definitely could be a good time. It's kind of similar time to here actually. Here it's 11 a.m. So a bit more natural light, which is always nice. We don't have to rely on as much of the artificial lighting, which is good. Hopefully we'll have good quality. We have Albrecht, Andrea, hello from Hungary. We have Emmy Ekron, Ohio 4 a.m. Amazing, Emmy. Thank you so much for being here. Not to be taken for granted this time. And I hope I'll try and keep it entertaining in the process. It's going to be just one process, so I actually have a bunch of landscape photos. Let me open it up here for you. Sorry for stalling a bit. Where's my OBS? Here we go. So I'm going to add the picture in so you can see what I'm talking about. Or maybe I have one more to make it smaller. So basically these are going to be beautiful pictures of Turkish villages. Sent to me by a follower on Instagram, Dilara. So thank you so much, Dilara. If by chance you're watching this, I really appreciate it. She reached out and said that she has some cool pictures that she thinks I'll enjoy painting, and it really is my kind of preference in terms of rural, beautiful views. So that's gonna be great. So let me start with one. I don't know which one I'm gonna paint yet. So we're just going to open up maybe my two favorites because they have a lot of potential. So this is going to be 91. So let me get that one open here. And we can even talk a bit about the photos and kind of analyze them and see what may be a good reason to paint them or what could be a challenge. That kind of thing is always fun. Albert says, it's 10 a.m. here in Hungary, Europe. Cool. Kimberly, yay, Melbourne, Australia. Here I feel special. Yvonne says Michigan, USA, which makes sense because you said it's 4 a.m. as well. So yeah, definitely the Aussies, and maybe, I don't know, what other time zones are close. India, some parts maybe, I'm not even sure. Japan, maybe the same time zone. Sorry, I'm really unfamiliar with that time zone, unfortunately. And I'm also, me being in a bit of a weird time zone for many people. Okay, so this is one photo I really, really like. Because it has a lot of the classic kind of, beautiful colors, beautiful differences in temperatures, with the mountains are a little bit blue, which is fun. Allows for some cool effects that you can get with the background. Now, another one I really like is this one. So this is going to be 97. save. So what I like about this one, and you'll see it in just a second, is the subject itself. I like when there's this kind of a, little cabin or like a little structure. That's always a fun focal point to optionally paint. And as I look at these photos, the one thing I'm looking for is big shapes, right? Big shapes of value that will allow me to there is actually a couple of things that are interesting. First is big shapes. If I can analyze these and create big shapes of value that will look good, that's the first. The second thing I would say is, what was it? Oh, yeah, depth. Okay, I forgot for a second. Depth. Something to lead us in the photo. So I actually really like this one in terms of depth. It has this road, there's a lot of lines, it will lead us onto the trees and onto the mountains and onto the fields. I also really like that second one right here, because it has also that lead in, but then a bit more of an interest in the structure of the house itself. So either could work. We can try both if we're quick, and I do plan for this process to be fun and kind of whimsical, so we'll see about that. Let me see who's more in the chat and then we'll get started. We have Seshiria says hi, thank you for being here. Kimberly says New Zealand is 2 hours ahead. Cool. Nathan Dixon, hey Liron, hey, how are you doing? Jonathan Way, hey, nice reference photos, thumbnail exercise today. Yeah, we'll just actually paint them. We can do a thumbnail if you want to, definitely. I can just we can do like a tiny one here on my test paper. That could actually be fun. Let's do that. You know what, let's do that. I like to listen to the chat. So we have this, right? Just a small piece of paper, and we can really do a quick attempt and see how we like the colors, how we like their combinations, what things to notice, let's actually do one for each and see which one we prefer. We can go with that, But yeah, if this is your first live stream, you can do a hashtag first live. Just curious to hear how many people are unable to join, usually due to the hour, of course. For me, it's actually nice to kind of do this earlier. I'm trying to calculate, like, okay, so this is 5 hours earlier than my usual streams, which is really fun. I don't know, just to do it earlier, because then I'm super duper tired later on. Hey John, how are you, my friend? Hope everything is going well with you too. Thank you so much. And I had another question for the chat, but in any case, I'm going to remember it in a second. So let's start with one and see how we do. I'm just going to get rid of a few leftover kind of reference photos I had from previous live streams. So yeah, I'm just curious to hear if this is your first live stream, and hopefully you're happy to finally be able to catch one, because I know the time is sometimes problematic. So I think we'll get started with this one. This one is really, really nice. So we'll do a tiny thumbnail here. We don't even need to, and I will talk a bit about my tools. So let's get rid of this actually for now. Ruth is here on the sofa, her favorite spot. So yeah, let us, okay, just a word about my paints here. I'm gonna use a very simple palette, which is gonna be, and let me turn off that annoying autofocus, because it just leads to problems. I don't know why it's so annoying. So my colors are very simple, and I'm rediscovering my love for quinacridone rose recently, so I'm going to be using a lot of that, not as much of a Parylene. There we go, let's see here. Is this the sharpest? I can't tell. I think this is good. Good, we'll save it like that. So what I have here is basically quinacridone. Now let me turn off this light and see if it interferes with my color harmony. No, it doesn't matter as much, so I'll just leave it open. So we have quinacridone rose here at the top right corner, which you'll barely see. We have French ultramarine. We have phthalo blue. So these are the two blues I'm going to rely on. And then we have Indian yellow right here, almost over, but don't worry, it's going to be enough. We don't need much of it actually. And I think we'll use a bit of that May green because it looks so good on those fields and this kind of a thing. Maybe I can get away without using it. Maybe I can just use yellow, but we'll see about that. So let's see here. We have Sung Xiao Gang. Hello. I'm in Melbourne. Cool. Thank you for being here. I'm happy to see new names. That's what I have to say. You have finally caught your live in my time zone. You got here right on time because we're gonna jump into the demo. Nathan says this is my first live after years and years. I actually caught you live. That's amazing, Nathan, because we talked quite a bit before. You know, here and there we got the chance to interact, and it's cool. It's cool to hear that this is the first time. So yeah. I'm gonna work with this tiny piece of paper. You don't need much more than that, and hopefully you will see. I will hold it up in just 1 second as I paint, okay? So what we have here is horizon line, and don't worry, I'm gonna again hold it up so you see it better. So we got this horizon line here, and then sorry about the white balance. Maybe I'll do the white balance manually as well. You know what? Let's try it out. I don't know why it's so weird. Maybe I'm not used to this light too. So white balance. Are we on the warm side? I think we're on the warm side. Why is the auto so annoying, you know? I don't get it. So let's try and save it like this, see what happens. Is it too much? No, that's good. That's good. We don't need that. Yeah, good. So we have the horizon line, and then look at what we have here. We have one mountain to the left, right? And look at, I'm barely, you know, I'm just putting those in very lightly. One mountain to the right, okay? And then this is really important because we have this field here. Let's get this horizon line to be more straight. And then we have this kind of a thing here. Now, one thing I am trying to avoid is leading straight to the corner. So I'm going to do it either here or there, but not on the corner. Just from a compositional aspect, it makes sense. Just keeps the viewer within the photo, right? So this is pretty much everything we need here. We do have a few bushes, trees, stuff like that. Let's get this tree to be taller than the mountain, just so that it pops up a little more, right? And look at what we got here. This is as simple as it gets, right? All I care about is this blue, soft mountain ridge, this kind of muted green mountain ridge, these beautiful fields here that are green, yellow, a little lighter, and this dirt road, right? That's all we need here to get the impression we want. We do have, of course, the blue of the sky and all of that. And the question is always like, what process are we going to use? Are we going to do wet and wet? Are we going to start top to bottom? Now, to me, in this small of a thumbnail, all I'm going to really focus on is filling in the areas. It doesn't matter as much the process, and in fact, it may be better to avoid wet and wet because it's going to be all over the place, and it's such a small area that wet and wet will lead to much less control, in my opinion. Okay, so we'll just fill in the areas basically. Okay, we're good. Ida sends hearts. Thank you so much. So yeah, let's get going here and see what we got. Now I'm gonna make my window a little smaller. Let's make sure you can at least see the palette properly, like this. And we'll get started with the sky. Now I'm using whatever leftovers I have here. I don't clean it. It just adds to the organic feel of the painting, in my opinion. You know, you can do whatever works for you. That's how I like it. Now the sky does transition from blue to a slightly warm color, but again, this is such a small piece of paper. I'm either gonna include it or I'm not. It doesn't really matter as much. Let's charge this corner with a bit more blue. Now notice how if I use just pure ultramarine, it would be very strong, like here, right? So the fact that it's mixed with other stuff here really gives it, I think, a cool organic feel. Now I'm gonna add a bit of those warmer wells, and let's try and go for a bit of a warmer version down below. And now what I like to do here is just pick up a bit of the excess moisture. So I'm basically wiping my brush on the paper towel, picking up some of that excess moisture so that I don't get any backgrounds, right? And then we can skip the mountains for now, or we can use wet and wet to establish them. So I think I'm gonna give this guy a few more moments. You can see it's still wet. You see that sheen, right? So we can even skip it and move straight to the crops down below. And let's try, now we will have to keep this fairly clean as a yellow. You know, brightness does not come from a pure color, it comes from the context of the scene. But the value does play a role. So I'm gonna try to keep the value fairly light, okay? Right here, as I fill in this area. And by the way, if I had not filmed this, I would have gone much faster. I'm going slow and explaining everything I'm doing just, you know, because it's a demo, but I'll go much faster. This doesn't have to be slow and tedious. You just can go through it in just literally seconds, usually under a minute for me. Now I do see a bit of emerald or stronger green here within those kind of foliage, you know, whatever it is, bushes, stuff. So I can put that in already, even though it's super wet and wet, right? Doesn't matter as much here. And I think it's time to get those mountain ridges in the background. So here I'm gonna add a bit of phthalo blue to make a bit of a cooler kind of blue, and then a bit of ultramarine. Now we're gonna start fairly muted on the left, like that. And notice how this green sticks out a lot, because I didn't mix it organically. So maybe we will avoid that in the actual painting, right? So these are the kinds of lessons we're looking for. And we're gonna start here with a muted mix of all three colors. And look at what's gonna happen. Of course, we're gonna have some bleeding into the sky, because the sky is still a little moist from earlier. And as I move to the right, and I'm avoiding touching the crops too much so that it doesn't blend in too much into them. And as I move to the right, I'm gonna lighten up and keep it a little bit of a cleaner blue. Okay, so I'm gonna do these two things together. Lighter and cleaner blue. That's how you hopefully get that effect of the mountain ridge here to the right. It's a little weaker, right? And then we'll get this one later on. And we can get the green on the other side of that dirt road, whatever that is. Again, I'm using a combination of May green and a bit of my yellow. Something like this. And for the dirt road, it looks a little purple actually, but I think I'll keep it a little orange instead of that. I don't know why, I always tend to prefer orange over purple for some reason. So there we go, something like that would work. Putting in initially a light value, like that. And then we'll do the other parts kind of wet and wet, right? Hopefully you can see something here. Nona says, hi Liron, sending love from Melbourne. It's nice to see you live. Thank you so much. Yeah, and if you don't see this part too well, then I will definitely, you know, we'll do a larger, see it on a proper sized paper, but hopefully you can still see this, right? And then, again, we can do that kind of wet and wet stage. Like that. Ruth can have her cameo. So because it's a lot of people's first time here, we will give you want to look in the camera and say hi to the Australians, Melburnians, and all sorts of different places. Okay, you can go. As you probably know, Ruth doesn't like the spotlight. So yeah. So I'm going to do some wet and wet here, and the timing I think should be good now. Let's see. So I'm using a bit of a neutral tint here just to get this darker a little faster. And let's see what we get. So I'm going to do this. So it's a little too late, right? Because we took our time with Ruth here. But still a bit of spreading out, right? So then there's a bit of here. And we can always just spray a bit of water just to keep it moving for a bit. It's a bit of a risk with a smaller piece of paper, right? But, you know. So this kind of a thing, that kind of a thing. Just make sure they come out of the same spot, right? Because I kind of messed that up. And you can add a bit of green if you want to, just in some spots there. You don't have to, but I do see some more green here and there, right? And this actually is a shadow from the crops on the right. So that's something you may play around with later on, okay? Now notice one thing here. This gets much darker here, the closer it gets. So we will definitely darken that a little more, but let's get rid of that mountain there in the back. So we'll just use, basically we'll mix a green and add a bit of red to it, and that will give us a more muted kind of green. So let's see if we mix something that looks kind of nice. So I think that's okay. Right, I'm going to pick up the pace a bit because I do want to get to that second scene. So I'm going to use the similar mix, but maybe increase the green a bit and put that tree here in the distance. And that's going to layer in front of those mountains in the back, right? Which should and could be darker, but that's fine for this demo's sake. And I'm actually going to start darkening here the grass that's closer to us. I don't want to go into too many details, but I do think it's important. So this entire area should be darker, and as it goes up and gets away from us, I'm basically gonna add a bit of water and kind of blend that in like that. And you can keep gaps and leave all sorts of interesting tidbits if you want to, of course, create some interest. But in essence, that's kind of the scene, right? Now the mountain here should be a little darker. That's just polishing, right? So I can go over it again with a bit of stronger blue. Get it to contrast even less with the trees, right? But that's, again, a matter of personal taste. That's just a matter of smaller corrections, right? You can do those a lot later on. But that's the gist of the scene. If you enjoy it, paint it, right? So I'm going to set this one aside, and we're going to go much faster over the next one. Now let's see what we get here. So this is going to be a different process, because this time I want to focus our attention on the little cabin or structure, right? And of course, when we work big, we'll have a lot more opportunities to get it to look the way we want. So let's see here. Now, what I'm lacking in this one is a bit of depth, right? So I'm already biased a bit against painting this one. The only real depth element is those, you know, this road, this dirt road or whatever that is. How old is Ruth? She's about 5, if I'm not mistaken. Around that area. She's still young. And we wish she could stay young. For her. She's so adorable, really. We're in love with her. One says, hi from South. So I'm not sure. Oz is like Australia. I don't know what Aussie is. I need to learn the abbreviations for places I'm unfamiliar with. With the States, I'm starting to get it, but I'm a bit slow. So yeah, horizon line down below. I'm going to go over this one much faster. Let's do this one in the rhythm I would if I would work normally. So this mountain here, we do have this small cabin. This goes a bit up like that. Just the ground itself. Sorry, I know you can't see anything. The ground itself. And then we have this right here. A little cabin. You don't even need to at some point really look at the reference much. Because that's the subject, really. That's all there is to it. And then we have the road here. Colossus, I don't know what you'd call this. Like that. So I twisted them a bit to the right. Maybe it'll look a little more dynamic, right? And we'll get started top to bottom. My brushes keep falling. Sky. Then we'll get to the demo. Wasn't planning on doing these thumbnails, but it is fun. So I'm going to use a bit more phthalo this time, not for any particular reason. It's a nice color. So this is our sky. And then we need to mix, I feel like, a bit of a warm kind of gray. So a bit of the quinacridone, a bit of our ultramarine, a bit of our yellow, and that'll create the gray. And then we can add a bit more of the quinacridone, and we will kind of get it where we want to. So I feel like, sorry, that's close. And I'll do this without waiting too much on the sky to dry this time. We'll do a bit of a different process. And where I want it to blend together, I will touch the sky. So kind of like that. And that area will meet, right? What I have a bit of less clarity in this scene in particular is the ground and these areas in the foliage, which makes me a little hesitant to paint it, but we'll see. And then we have a bit of foliage here and there. We can add a bit more blue, a bit more yellow, just to green it up a notch as we move closer, right? I know you can't see much, don't worry. We'll do a proper big size demo. And then I'm gonna switch to a super duper light green. We'll try and keep it kind of isolated and not blend too much with the rest. Something like that. Honestly, it could be even a strong value, but just a very saturated green, you know, I'm not sure. And even there behind you can see it. And you see I'm really going over this kind of a la prima. I'm letting everything mix together. And then as we move closer, there's this shadow on the ground. That actually turns out really nicely. So let's see. Kind of like this. And we're going to cover up the road itself. And let's get this little rooftop here. A little red. I don't mind that red mixing with my surroundings. And then we'll leave the highlights where they need to be. So actually what I see here, this is tiny, it's a bit hard to control, but I want you to see the overall shape is, this shouldn't be a highlight, this shouldn't be a highlight. And the only real highlight I see here is on the right, so I'm just gonna do this. And then we'll get some of those tracks. That was the word I was looking for earlier. So you see, I'm at this point I'm just looking at the abstract composition, right? Whether I like it or not. Of course I won't get the details in here, this is tiny. But this is nice. I definitely prefer this one. I feel like there's a clearer message here. But I like the usage of red. So here's one thing to note. I like when you can see all primary colors. So I'm gonna borrow, and this is why it's good to do these thumbnails, I'm gonna borrow the idea of a bit of redness and bring it over to this one, even though there isn't really any in it, right? So we'll have to think about it. Maybe we'll put a little cabin somewhere or something. Maybe we'll just borrow this and put it here in the distance where the sky meets the ground, something like that. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Of course, the values here are off. I can go over it, darken. In fact, if I want to really darken it, the whole lower section should be darker. Let's do that real quick, and then we can move on to an actual larger one. But if you want to be truer to the reference, you'll see that there is a very dark tree there, and then this entire thing is in the shadow, and that'll create a bit more of a sense of depth, maybe. See, like that. And this green starts to glow a little more, right? So this is the abstract composition we're talking about. So we'll go with this, we'll borrow an element for this, we'll see how it goes, okay? It's gonna be a bit of a challenging one. And drawing it too, because I'm gonna add, again, a touch of my own. But we'll see how it goes. I do really prefer the depth in that first example, right? So we can maybe borrow the depth from that one, the cabin from the other one. I'm gonna open it up large on my screen, because all this time I was looking at a tiny thumbnail. Yeah, and that's nice. So I have some ideas. We'll see how it goes. Let me just take a quick look at the chat. Ida says, awesome to be here. Yeah, I'm really happy for people who finally managed to join. Jonathan Way says, biking home from work and will rejoin. Awesome. So we'll see you in a second. Kimberly, is the thumbnail just acting as the draft before a bigger time? Yeah, kind of like that. It's not even, okay, so one thing, it's not even about the thumbnail itself and looking at it afterwards. It's more about the experience you went through when you painted the thumbnail. So that experience will help us. We can actually throw this in the trash if we want to, trust me, because the moment I won't, because I like these small thumbnails, but the moment you did it once, you will be able to better do it once again. So let's see here. So I'm gonna open up the reference properly on my end, and we'll get to drawing. I'm gonna keep the drawing fairly fast, because I do want to keep this simple and focused around painting. Usually I'll sometimes even draw in advance, but I do want to show you the whole process. So here we go. So I got the reference in my end. Thumbnail is such a, yeah, definitely, it just helps, John, it just helps and gets you more prepared, significantly more prepared to paint once it's showtime. So I'm gonna make this small, and by the way, you never know what's gonna happen when you do these demos. I have no idea if the painting is gonna turn out like anything nice looking, or it's gonna be a total crap show. You never know. Now I'm gonna zoom out just a bit, because I want to make sure you can see the paper. Sorry about the shakiness. And sorry about the awkward angle, but it's gonna help. There we go. Bit of that. Make myself a little smaller. And the reference is also pretty visible. I can make that smaller. And we'll get to painting this, okay? It's a bit of an angle, but I think you should be able to see everything great. So, okay, let's do it like this. Hopefully it is focused. Yeah, it looks like it's focused. I'm gonna get started on the drawing. So I'm gonna actually switch to a normal pencil. I find that I like these types of pencils better than a mechanical pencil for larger pieces where I can afford it, and kind of when it's a free landscape and kind of fun. So as for the horizon line, it's again at a bit of an angle, but I'm gonna straighten it out. Should we keep the angle? It looks a bit dynamic, but also a little awkward. So honestly, I think I will change it. So top here, I'm going to measure a similar measurement here, but I'm going to go a little lower. So I'm keeping the slight diagonal, but I'm making it very gentle. So that's our horizon line. Can you see this? Yeah, good. Okay. So this is our horizon line. We got to put in the mountain ridge and the road and everything. So now that I opened it a bit larger, I can see that the road actually twists from the right. So let's keep that. And this goes far beyond the half, the middle point, and that's actually the same way I did it here. So you see that's about a third maybe, something like that. That's how I initially measure things, very easily. You just compare it to the edges of paper, really. That's all you have to do. And then this other side, and this leads somewhere around about a third, even more than a third, so maybe around here. And one thing that bugs me is that shape here, so let me fix that. That's gonna kind of pull us into the picture. I'm not gonna put a whole lot of emphasis on this part, but I'm just putting it in so that I remember it's there. Now, we have that mountain ridge to the left, and it has this very interesting shape to it. And of course, at this size, we can devote a lot more time and attention to the shapes individually, right? And then we have another one, starts low, and then it goes higher. And I'm gonna make it a little higher here. And I'll also make that tree taller than it in the mountain ridge. We're gonna have one big tree, and I'm gonna shift the smaller tree here. Not here, because this is too much at the edge. Even though I do see it here, I'm gonna move it around. These are the kind of small decisions that can make a difference, right? You can do things multiple ways, but sometimes these little decisions do make a difference. Now, as for perspective, we're looking into the distance, right? So I can drop a few lines just to hint to us how that works in case we want to add crops or fields or whatever, a cabin like we said. We may add them. The one thing you want to pay attention to is this line here. That's going to be fairly important, and that's where also I'm going to put in that small cabin. I'm going to just put it here against the mountain. And maybe we'll put another one, a taller one maybe, or maybe, maybe we'll angle it differently. I'm actually not sure. Let's do it like this. Something like that. It kind of ruins the depth actually, so the feeling of depth, the feeling of scale, because this should be much smaller. Let me do this. Let me put two here, so that'll break the pattern. So one like this, one like that, smaller ones. Good. So what you want to pay attention to here is I'm placing this not where the mountain is, closer, but still quite in the distance, okay? So this line is very important because it's the strong contrast between the mountains and the ground. There's going to be a lot of elements close to the ground, a lot of small trees. You see things that we can actually devote a lot of attention to now. And I love this vast kind of open perspective, if you will. Now, don't be fooled by the details. One thing that's always important to keep in mind, the details are secondary to those big shapes. The big shapes are what's going to make this look good, okay? So you want to make sure you see beyond the details and first take care of the large shapes. That's what I always say, and hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to put in a few highlights here and there. I'm just building it up so that I know where to paint stuff. And then we can get those bit of, foliage here and there. But I want to break off that pattern of, everything is the same kind of line. So one here, one maybe closer to us like this. Maybe with a little bit of a thing here. Maybe, maybe I won't even put that in. We'll see. And maybe a tree or two. And we're pretty much done. Now because this is such a vast scene, a lot of the beauty is going to be in the large shapes and in the gradual transitions. So what I think I'll do is make a decision right now to keep it more towards the French ultramarine, not focus as much on the phthalo blue. I want this to feel more unified. So it's going to be mostly French ultramarine, quinacridone rose, of course, that's going to look good, and the Indian yellow. And we can get to it. Now, I don't know, again, it's the first time I tackled this scene large. So I may discover that the way I decided to go about it wasn't the right way or wasn't the best way for me. This is all experimentation. I'm trying to lower the pressure for all of us, okay? So it's cool if it doesn't turn out the way you imagine. It very likely will not if this is the first attempt. So yeah. Kimberly says, wow, that's super helpful, helping with the colors. chosen, let alone the placement, I guess. I'm shocked you are using the same brush throughout. Yeah, like a pretty big one too. This is my. I'm gonna pre-wet the paint a bit just to keep it moving. So this was the Escoda, and now I'm switching to my Lebenson brush, which is turning out to be quite popular. The large goat hair, just because it has really good water capacity, and very versatile. So I can do large areas, small areas, but I find it really good for vast areas like this one. Now I'm gonna let the values guide me on this one and make sure I get those right. So, and the colors are gonna be secondary. The colors I'm kind of constraining to what I have. If I can mix what I see, great. If I can't mix what I see, also great. But the one thing I do care about here is the values. So I'm gonna get started here on the sky. A lot of water, because I want things to move really well. I'm using a Bauhong paper that many are familiar with. I'm going to move this wash down slowly and patiently, okay? And I'm going to do a bit of that again, ultramarine touch to the sky. Now, keep your shapes small when you begin. Don't be tempted to move them a lot, because when it's small, it's controlled, okay? When it's small enough, you can still do a lot of changes if necessary, shift things around. So I'm going to switch to something a little more neutral or muted. That's actually quite green, so let me mix something warm here. I'm going to try something out and we'll see how it goes. I'm mixing something warm, and I'm going to use a gap here before I let the two mix, okay? Then I'm going to come back with some water and let them touch. And that's going to kind of move downwards. It's just a fun way of doing it. And so I wasn't really sure how I'll begin, but now it becomes a little clearer to me. I'm going to do an initial wash that covers almost everything. And I'm going to keep a few highlights here, like this small cabin in the distance. I'm going to cover everything up for starters, I think. Or we can stop here and make the most out of this. In fact, let's do that. So what I'm looking at right now is how wet the paper is. So we see this wash, it's still quite wet. So we can do quite a bit of wet and wet with it, right? I love that there's natural light finally, because usually in my streams I have to rely by now on the artificial light. It's just not as fun. So while this is still wet, we can do quite a bit. I'm going to put in that mountain to the left. The only disadvantage really is that we're going to have to use very strong paint to negate the wetness on paper. So I'm going to mix using all my colors. I'm actually bringing in a bit of phthalo blue because it darkens really fast. So there are some advantages to using it. And because it's going to be so dark, it's not going to really be noticeable that it's outside our color scheme, right? And mixing this muted green. So let's see what we get if we apply that to paper. Is that strong enough? Honestly, I'm not sure. And it's probably should be a little more muted, so a bit more red, like that. And we're going to place that wet and wet. We don't have too many highlights to work around, so we're good. Now, the drier this wash gets, the thicker we'll have to mix this paint, okay? So that's just another thing to have in mind. So I'm going to add a lot of neutral tint here and a bit of yellow. I find that neutral tint and yellow look really good, like a dark green, very easily. This is Daniel Smith neutral tint, and I'm going to start charging into those areas a bit of a darker value. Now the right side starts to dry, so let me do this because I want a soft edge there. I'm going to switch brushes, and we're going to start with what I have here. I'm gonna keep the blue fairly pure for now because I'm charging it into a layer that's a little warm, so I do want it to show. And the beauty is, again, as long as you don't continue to wash, you have some time to play around with it. Okay. Now, one thing I always show is when you move the brush on paper, the paint's not going to spread out too much. When you dab, that's when it spreads out. Okay, so one thing to pay attention to. And then I'm going to add a bit of even stronger blue here and there because I think it's gonna dry a little muted, so I'm just gonna go for it here. This side is probably gonna spread out. Let me add some of that darkness and start darkening it a bit to make sure that it will stay once this whole thing dries, because again, we're doing pretty serious wet and wet. Can you see this? Can you see the shine? So while I want this side to fade a bit, I do want to make sure that it's visible, the mountain ridge. I'm gonna go over it a few more times just to make sure what I have will stay. And by this time, the left side is ready for some more work, okay? Now, let me spray a bit here. I'll add a bit more water to make this dry a little lighter, I think. And the reason I switched brushes because I already have very dark paint here. And I need that black. And here I don't need it as much, so yeah. And I'm gonna start, you see, charging in those beautiful darks that are gonna be visible once this dries, okay? So that's how you kind of structure it. Again, if you stop with the wash, you use the bead, you have some time to add any necessary details and to make improvements, make it look good, and hopefully once it dries, it all looks cohesive and like it makes sense. One thing I do want to make sure I get right is I feel like I'm lacking a bit in blues here. So I'm going to do something strange. I'm going to charge some phthalo. I want to make sure this turns out blue. Okay, good. Now we'll let this do its thing, and I'm going to start moving the wash down. Which means we're going to start switching to a lighter green. Now the way I'm going to do this is by keeping a gap, because I don't want everything I did up top to blend into the bottom, because that's going to be a disaster, right? And sorry, I can't really stop and read any messages right now. I need to really be in it. But this is a stage where you can be a little more careful. Now, initially I went too light. So, and that's the lesson we learned here, right? We went too light on the first attempt. I thought, oh, it's super light. But it's a very common mistake, and I'm not above making it. So, this looks to me not strong enough. So I'm going to mix here again. This is May green and a bit of my Indian yellow. So even though it looks really strong, that's actually the mix we need here for the distance. So look at what I'm doing here. I'm keeping a gap in most areas, not letting the two touch so that it doesn't seep through into my crops. Okay? And I'm going to add a bit of water just to keep it lighter. And again, the small shapes allow you to make all of these changes, right? And in fact, I'm going to make it a little more yellow, like this. Keep the shape small. You can do quite a bit with it. And yes, we're going to get a bit of a gap, white gap in many places. I'm fine with that, actually. It's going to look good. I'm going to close it off in some select spots, you see, and let them bleed through. Just it will look good. But now we still have a vast wash, so we need to make sure we continue it. So I'm going to add a bit more green and a bit more blue, actually. And let's see if we can move the wash fast enough and make it a little darker, you see, as we get closer to us. Now, what did I say? Remember, I missed the red. I needed more red here. So I'm going to actually edit here. The red will play the role of neutralizing some of that wash. And it may not exist there in reality, but it will actually improve the way this looks. I really believe that. And I'm going to have a bit of red in this house here in the farther distance, just saying. And let's add a bit more green, a bit more blue. You see how when you're working these big shapes, it's harder because you have to work a little faster sometimes, but it also gives you the freedom to vary them, to make them interesting, to add some details. You know, it's much more fun, I find, and very rewarding. Let me look at the monitor and see what you're seeing. Yeah, that looks good. Good. And you see how that red really plays an important role here. It actually makes it look better, in my opinion. I'm actually going to charge a bit of it in some other select spots, not even knowing what it means. So maybe a bit here and a bit there. I just need that as a compositional means, you know? And we can probably add it to the rooftop of the structure in the distance. So let me see how I'm going to do this. I'm going to use mostly quinacridone rose and a bit of pyrrole scarlet. And keep them light, and let's see what we get here. I don't want it to mix too much with the blue there, so I'm keeping a gap. You can close these gaps later, don't worry about them too much. I know it's like, Usually it's not best practice necessarily to leave them, but yeah, I'm kind of fine with that, to be honest with you. You can close them off in some select spots, or you can use them as highlights, you know, that looks pretty cool too. Now, one thing we have to take care of is that road, and we need to be fast here. So because I put some red here, we don't need much red in the road. Should I go purple? Should I go, you know, I want it to just look as part of the scene. So let me see. Let me put something in here and we'll see how it looks. Starting light. Like that. You know what we'll do? We'll start blue in the distance. And we'll get it to be warmer the closer it is. Let's see how we do that. So you see just a bit of fun and nuance. If we go a little cooler up top, makes sense in the grand scheme of things. I'm gonna keep the crops here a little muted too, so yes, a bit of green, but also kind of, you know, like that. And a bit purple for the shadows here. So we're using quite expressive colors. That's my phone. Just a second. הלו. כן, את יכולה. לא, אולי זו טעות? תודה. תודה. Bye. That was the post office woman. I have to answer, otherwise my package is gonna end up who knows where. Sorry about that. So yeah. So I'm doing these brush marks, and you heard Ruth crying a bit because she's like, is someone here? Is someone coming? So yeah, I kind of lost focus there, but I think I need more blue. So spray some water to keep it wet and add some blue. I feel like I need more blue here. I don't know if it's a false instinct or that's actually true, but I feel like a bit of blue will go a long way here. And let me see this on the monitor. Yeah, I like the way it looks. Let me show you without the sheen, because you see it probably reflected pretty strongly, but that's what I got here. I really like those mountains in the background. It ended up very expressive, actually. Let's see here. What kind of color is that? I'm sometimes trying to zoom in and figure out the color I'm looking at now. I'm unsure of. Let's see. Yeah, so that's kind of a muted blue. Yeah. But it's more towards the blue, so maybe this kind of a thing here. Now you're running the risk of course, going a little too late with the wet and wet, so you have to be careful there, right? This is the main shadow because of the shape of the... In fact, let me enhance the effect here. So we have this, we have another one here, cast shadow. But look at what happens next to the cast shadow. We have this part that I'll have to lift. So I'm taking my brush, wiping it here on the paper towel, and look at what I'm gonna do here. Let me just make sure you can see. Yeah, you can see well. What I'm gonna do is the lift. So we have the darkness, and then the part that is beveled outwards to make that darkness, and then there should be this kind of a thing lightening up. Did I get it in the right spot? I think so, yeah. And then the same goes on that other part. So we have the dark, medium, and then kind of light. Okay, and hopefully that kind of will lead us in. The same actually goes on that left side. That, again, I'm starting to be too late with the effect here. So yeah, we have it here actually. To the left. Yeah, I can't lift that, I think. I'll try, but it may end up being awkward. Let's take the risk here. So this here. See? And doing all of these small touches may play a role in improving the impression, right? So let me try with a bit of water. That's a huge risk now because it's going to seep into the road, but I do want to lift that. There we go. So now maybe some of the shapes on that road make a little more sense. Now what I'm going to do is let all of this dry very naturally. I don't think I need or can do any wet and wet here. So while this dries naturally, and I'm going to use the hairdryer, but I'm going to read some of your messages. Once it dries, we'll add all of the trees and the different details, and this is what's going to get the sense of depth. So this tree, for example, is going to contrast beautifully with that mountain ridge behind it, right? And then it's going to make it pop, right? I don't know if you can see this well because it's still moist. Let me take a few questions from the chat, and then we'll, while this dries, we'll then revisit it. one more note I will add. This needs to be darker, right? I said I'll darken it, the foreground. I haven't enough. So what we're gonna do probably later on is reverse flip this, start dark and then go light onto what we have here, not change that. What this is gonna do, again, if everything is light, nothing is light. To get something to look light, you need to add the dark. So this area here, to make it really look light, you need to darken this area right there. And I actually really like the color, so I'm gonna preserve them, but just do another wash over it. Darken from bottom to top, and then this will really shine, and it will also make the road make more sense, because it will make some parts of it as light as they should be. Okay, so let me look at what you're saying and chat. Now we'll get there. Oh, hey Tom, I'm just gonna grab this before you can see me well. Ooh, quite a lot of people. Obi says something. That's a spam message. Usually I delete these. Richard Bennett, hey, how are you? Hello everyone. Lovely surprise to see a stream on a Tuesday morning. Yeah, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for being here. Try doing a bit of a different time. Tom Dancer, hey all, hey Liron, sorry I can't stick around. Endless busy lately. Yes, same here, man. It's tough. Hopefully it'll be watchable later as usual. Of course, yes. Here, have a like before I go. Thank you so much. And if you can, everyone here, take a minute and like this stream. It really helps it reach more people, and because I do want a lot of people to watch it after the fact, and I'm sure they will. So, yeah. Neda says hello. Thank you for being here. Henny, how are you? Lovely scene to paint. Was just wondering how to capture these greens and distant hills with more interest. Oh, by the way, Liron sent you an email with a Yorkshire scene. Looking forward to your feedback. Yeah, we talked about that. I remember. I'll check it out. I haven't seen the email, but I'll check it out. Kimberly, so minimal water on the brush and the paper itself is dry. When I put the first wash, yeah, that was the situation. And spritzing water just to make it, stay a little wet for longer so that I can do all of these manipulations. Honestly, what I should have done, and that would have been ideal, is notice how not only do I need red here, but I also need it to be significantly darker. So had I been more attentive, I would have noticed that I really need to add some darkness here, and I could have gotten it in the first wash and not deal with it as a second glaze, which is always a little harder and looks less fresh, right? So just a lesson for us here, real quick, that's the thing you want to pay attention to, right? In real time, this area needed to be much darker, and I should have mixed a much stronger paint and then put it on paper. Just a lesson, it is fixable, we'll do a glaze over it, right? It's not the end of the world, but it could have been a little fresher and a little more good looking, I guess. Jonathan says, wow, so colorful. Yeah. Sukiao says, any suggestions to do better wash wet in wet? Since Melbourne is super dry. Yeah, that's actually very simple. So I'll give you the same advice I give everyone, to be honest. What you really need to do is stack everything in your favor. So what do I mean by that? There are different factors that influence how fast, the paint dries and all of that. You really want to stack those, and by the way, I know I missed a bunch of messages. Sorry, I lost the stream. There we go. Don't worry. Yeah, one thing I wanted to say. Sorry, I'm all over the place. I just wanted to say, if you have any questions, I'm trying to be very interactive between the washes, so definitely ask them, because I know quite a few people here are like first time. So definitely ask any questions you have, and I'll do my best to answer everything. Okay, just saying, so that I don't forget. As for the question, the same thing. Have the paper at a bit of a stronger angle, right? So instead of it being flat, lift it up. And by the way, here's the painting not at an angle, but have it at an angle to help the water move down. That's always a good one. Now, if you're doing pure wet and wet, pre-wetting the paper and all of that, sometimes you need it to be straight like that because you don't want the paint to move always downwards, right? So just one thing to have in mind. But generally speaking, have it move down, pre-wet twice. I know that's a little strange, but I find that I need to sometimes go twice over the thing in order to really bring out the value I want. Not the value I want, the time I need to actually paint this properly. So you do first glaze with water or with paint, go over it again if it's water. It needs to be absorbed into the paper, and then you need to put another wash. Now, one more thing I would say is to use larger brushes if you have to, right? So I have this brush here. Compared to the size of my page, can make my life a whole lot easier, right? Because I can paint big areas together. It is also an interesting exercise because you may find that you enjoy that process a little more. It saves you more time. Another thing I would say is there is a challenge that comes with that. That big brushes require a lot of mixing. You need to mix a lot more paint. So just saying that, but that can really help. Smaller piece of paper can also help, right? you have to work with the weather conditions you have, whatever they are, which can be a challenge. I know. Jonathan says, so just attack in wet to wet on first wash to get the dark areas. Yeah, that's kind of how I do it. How I did it in this particular one. There are many ways of doing it. Actually, you don't have to do it this way. You can let it dry, do multiple glazes. I just wanted this to feel a little fresh, and I wanted the main line of kind of change to be the ground versus that horizon. So yeah. Now that I look at this again, I know how I'll do the second wash. This is going to be fun. I'm going to talk a bit about it, and then we'll look at a few more chats, and then we'll continue. I think the ideal way would be to do the same process from top to bottom, but because I don't want to darken this, I can either use clean water or just maybe a very clear yellow. So I will show you in just a second how I do it. It's going to be fun. I love doing this kind of a process. I'm going to get rid of some paint here just so that I can keep it a little lighter and yellower in the distance. But what I'll do is basically, again, I'm going to start with a thin wash, and as I move down, I'll strengthen it for real so that it's as strong as what you see in the reference photo. Anupama says, hello from India. Just wanted to say thank you for this live demo. You got it. Thank you so much. It is my pleasure. Dream Sketcher. Hi, I just discovered you from Ontario, Canada. It's 5 a.m. also. Ever use a hairdryer? Yes, definitely. What I find is Dream Sketcher, if you can avoid the hairdryer just for a few more moments, the painting will sometimes dry much nicer. And then you can, for that last 10%, dry it. Now, if you're short on time, I'll definitely use it. Now I have the benefit of like talking to the chat and everything, so talking to you, and that gives me some, time to let it dry, right? But generally speaking, yes, for sure. If I'm short on time, I'll use the hairdryer. Even on larger pieces, it ends up okay. You got it, Sun Xiao. Oh, hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly. Sorry. Is it Sun Xiao? Let me know. Jonathan says, I see. Thank you. Yeah, you got it. So I think we'll use the hairdryer. Piggybacking off that last question, I'm going to mute you because I don't want to, make anyone deaf. So here we go. Give me just a second. Okay, I think it's dry enough. I learned from experience that if I dry it here, the hair dryer heats my computer and it gets slower. So I try to avoid it, which is funny. It's pretty much dry now, and we can get to work. So I'm gonna first tackle that big wash. I like to start from large to small, even though a more satisfying thing could be to get this tree here. I want to start from here in particular. It's still a little, it's still a little moist. Maybe I should give it a bit more of a hair drying. Just give me a few more seconds, okay? Okay, we're good to go. Now, one of the benefits of doing this, another wash on top, is that it actually gives us an opportunity to start adding some more nuances and details. So let's see how we do that. So I'm going to start here by mixing something that's fairly yellow, fairly light. I just want something that does not stick out, doesn't stand out. And that's how I'm going to start my wash, okay? And very wet too. And I can close that gap now. I can use this opportunity. So I'm going to close mostly all of the gaps, and then as we move down, I'm gonna start going for a bit of a stronger yellow, and that may even make it a little stronger and darker. I'm gonna open it up here large. Now the paper I'm using, the Bauhong, I find I get mixed results when it comes to glazes. So sometimes it'll be a little hard to glaze properly on top of an existing layer. Sometimes it will reawaken it, so you got to be a little careful. Now, while we're working on that, let me mix a bit of a muted green here. You got to work fast in these cases. because I'm going to use this opportunity to put in some details, wet and wet. Okay? If you need more time, you can always use your water sprayer. Play around with the angle if it goes down too much. But this is a good opportunity to add something that may look like crops or details, you know. You don't have to go overboard with this, but just have some indication. Can be really useful. And I'm going to continue the wash. Now here's where it gets a little crucial, because around here I really do need to darken it. And darkening it means less movement, okay? Less movement makes it a little harder to paint. So you have to really pay attention. Now some of the red we put earlier will still show, so I'm not too worried about that. Spray a bit of water. I'm going to switch to a different brush so that I don't lose my mix here. And I'm going to use that to put in some more of those, you know, foliage details. Let's see how that goes. You know, there are some either trees or like the crops again, but you got to be strong here for it to take, even though you're doing wet and wet, you know, because of there's so much water and moisture on paper. You really have to beat it, right? And a bit more strength, and this gives it maybe a bit more of a detailed look into the distance. Now I'm gonna have to mix a lot more paint here, and I'm gonna maybe add a bit of neutral tint to make it a little easier to mix it dark. Well, this may be too dark, I'm not sure. I'm gonna play around with the mix and see. But I definitely need it to be darker than it was before to really get those crops to show here. The top parts to really be bright. Let me see if, yeah, that makes sense. That looks good. So I'm maintaining that same kind of color scheme, same palette. And let's get rid of this part fast. Gotta make sure that we're not losing too much of the flow. Should have used my Lebenson brush, honestly, for this, but that's fine. See, some of the brush marks are visible because I took my time. And of course, it's, again, thicker paint is just harder to control in that regard. Now, let me add a bit of neutral tint, a bit of yellow, maybe even a bit of blue here. And I'm going to just bring out a few of these smaller, you know, closer pieces of foliage. You can always do, you know, the splatter effect, whatever you want, whatever works for you, right? You can be a little creative here. And as we get to the actual road, I just want to make sure that whatever I do makes sense. Actually, let me go a bit of a weird route here with you. Let's do what, you know, Joseph Z, the master, does sometimes, charging a bit of water into it, just to see if we can get some spontaneous grass blades or some nice little details of interest. I don't often do this, charging and removing and charging and removing it as much, but who knows, you know, maybe it'll add some interest here and there. There's not too much to lose because you're so close to, you know, the finishing stages here. Now, as we get to the edge of this wash, I'm gonna spray some more water to mix everything, and it's just gonna transition to the road. I just wanted to get rid of some of those highlights that were there that were unnecessary. And then we can start actually treating that road and maybe adding some more nuance to it, right? So I'm gonna zoom in a bit here and see what we got. So I see a bunch of cool shadows, cool muted shadows. Let's see here. And I don't necessarily want to paint every shape I see here, of course, but I like the idea of maybe adding a bit more interest to the road. So for example, this looks a little dark thanks to these tracks or whatever that is. So I'm going to add that, and then as it goes down into that dip and goes lighter, see, the angle changes. And adding these details can really help it. I don't usually go this detail in this stage, but in these kinds of views, there's a lot going on, so I'm running also the risk of, you know, it looking really bad, but why not? For experiment's sake, let's try and pretend like we're creating some of these tracks, right? And then you can always spray some water if you want to move some of them around. They're not that visible, honestly, so you don't have to really put them in. But then as we get to the shadow, we get to a bit of a stronger blue that I actually like. I'll keep this soft. And then we have another kind of a shadowy pattern here, a little lighter. Again, I'm running the risk of really overworking some aspects here, but I don't care. That kind of blue. We need it to be more neutral, so a bit of yellow. Sometimes it's really hard to mix the paint, you see, Maybe it's just purple. So let's try that. Maybe that's better. And the important thing to remember is that we have basically a pile of ground that is beveled above the ground, and then it casts a shadow to the left. Doesn't make a lot of sense with that light section, but that's fine. And we'll smoothen out this out and then this out. And it may look like these are going to take too big of a role in our painting, but they're not, because as soon as we'll add the trees and some dark details there, our focus is going to shift a bit, right? Well, let me see if that makes sense. Yeah, it makes a bit of sense. I think it's a decent job I did here. I think I'll add a bit of those here too. You know what I can do? I can pre-wet this with a bit of a lighter wash, and then maybe add a bit of that here. I'm at this point, I'm like just looking. I'm not sure what I'm doing, to be honest with you. It's like, and that's not a good place necessarily to work from, but I'm just seeing a bit of those details here and there, so I'm trying to include them. Make it look like it's beveled and then it goes up and down, and all of these transitions. If there's any time to experiment, why not now, And then this is sharp, but this shadow is soft. And that's an important nuance. Cast shadows tend to be a little hard-edged, like this, while this is softer. And then one last shadow we have to add, which is probably the most important one, is that on the right here, which is it's just not defined enough. So I'm gonna mix that same kind of quinacridone rosy purple. And let's see what we got here. And we're just going to cast that shadow, following the shape of the foliage, okay? Kind of like that. And hopefully that makes sense. And all of the shadows details are going to move in this direction because it's cast by, different grass blades and whatever we're looking at, right? And once it dries, it'll make a bit more sense. But you can add a bit of those here, and again, do the kind of same process of just putting them and then going like this. You can even use your fingers to kind of smear them a bit and cancel some of them out if you want to make them not as prominent. But the overall impression hopefully will, look like a road or a ditch, something that leads us into the painting. And here we're at probably the most fun part of the painting process, which is, okay, we got to this point, we included quite a lot of details and interest. This I'm not going to touch anymore, I think, because it looks good. One thing I didn't do is add those darks here in the bottom. I totally forgot about them, wet and wet, right? We said we do that. I can do the same process of pre-wetting and then continuing, but I'm going to let that tree dictate it for me, because I'm not sure how many details I'd want to go through here until I see this tree and the other tree, okay? So that's our next step. Now let me look at the chat and see if you have any questions. Thank you, Sung Xiao. You are good. Thank you so much. I've seen so many artists using hairdryer to speed the process. However, it's never the case in Melbourne. Yeah, you don't need it, right? You get a natural hair drying capabilities just in the air. By the way, 41 people, thank you so much. If you can take a moment and leave a like on the stream, that will be greatly appreciated. I do see it's close to the number of likes, so thank you so much. John says, I have to go now, Liron, but we'll watch later on awesome live stream and painting. Thank you so much, John. Don't worry. It's going to stay up. You can watch it later. And I will post like a high quality scan, of course. So hopefully that will be nice to see. Tammy, how are you? It looks great, Liron. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sung Xiao. Lots of our... that's interesting. Submerge the paper, then staple it. Yeah, I've seen that too. Jonathan says road looks looking sweet now. Thank you. Terry says 4 a.m. in Covington. Wow, that's amazing. That's really late. Thank you so much for being here. Richard says, quick question, Liron. I have a 24 pen of Daniel Smith watercolor. The black pen is about to run out. I was thinking about replacing it with Daniel Smith neutral tint. Is that a sensible thing? Yeah, for sure. I'm of course. I actually have 2 more tubes here. They're great. Honestly, I really like the way it looks. You want me to maybe just show you? I don't know if it will help, but I can show you a bit of what it looks like just separately. So it'll be anything from this, right? Hopefully you can see this, sorry. From this, and then the really darks, if I really, dig through the pen, it gets really dark really fast. So I think it's great. I find that neutral tint actually works as a neutral paint. It actually kind of works with everything, and it stays, it's like a sponge. It'll soak up the color harmony you have and it will work. So I wouldn't be scared of that as long as you like the way it looks. It's just a gray, but it looks really nice, and it does make the darkening process a lot easier. By the way, you can't see the painting clearly because there's some light reflected, but if I do this, it looks a little close to what we got. And I think I'll also either take a picture or scan it for you live, and we'll look at the end result. I think it's going to look really cool. So one thing, it's funny how this looks wet. It's no longer wet. It's fully dry. So now it's the trees. And I'm a bit scared, to be honest with you, because it's like we worked so hard to get to this point, and now I get to put that one thing in the distance. So let me see how I'm going to tackle it. I don't want it to take too much attention. I don't want it to be too strong, but I kind of still want it to attract the viewer there. So let's make something and see how we do. I think it will be kind of neutral tinted yellow, honestly, because I want it to be very gray and very much in the distance. Yeah, it's the one thing we didn't really put a lot of emphasis on yet. Yeah, that looks actually really nice. So I'm gonna mix it here and we'll see how it goes. Okay, I'm just gonna put that in and hopefully it will work out. So I'm gonna use the side of the brush to try and maybe get an organic feel with the leaves, which I seem to be failing. Let's do this. That's better. Just something, right? It doesn't have to be, the shape doesn't have to be too defined. I actually like this, Let me do this. Let me just use this tiny brush to add a few twirls here and there. But I'm trying to still keep them fairly organic, right? Still look like a bunch of leaves or something like that. And we'll connect it to the ground here. Let me see it from far. Yeah, that's a little too strong, but what I can do, I think it's gonna dry okay. I actually think it's gonna dry nicely. Yeah. And then we'll add that smaller tree. In worst case, we can lift. If we have no choice, we'll lift. But I'm gonna add that tree that's a little triangular in shape, actually. Because it's so wet, it looks strong, but it'll probably dry much lighter. Now, I'm gonna do something fun here. So I'm gonna connect it to the background and add those darks that I forgot to add earlier. And we'll see how that goes. I can actually lift a bit from the, or either charge like clean yellow onto the right section, because I do see it as a bit of a lighter yellow section. So let's do that and we'll see how it goes. Maybe it'll give us the lightness we need. Maybe we can blend some of the edges to make them less, less prominent. Yeah, and I'm gonna do this. So I'm gonna pre-wet with maybe a bit paint, it's fine. And kind of let this mix onto the lower section, and then I'll use that to design the darkness on the lower section. So if I want to add a few more details, add a few more trees, whatever I need, I can do that now. See, just to bring out that darker punch. So honestly, I don't need much of, actually, just a bit. Yeah, let me see what this looks like here. It looks a bit strong, but honestly, I think it's gonna, should I make it less prominent? Let's give it a spray. And then let's give it a bit of a lift here. So I can do this once with this piece of paper, then I have to use a different one. Yeah, so I don't know, that looks a little I was scared for a reason. This is really nerve-wracking, but we'll see. It's a bit too strong, I think. But on the other hand, I don't want to play around with it too much. Let me try this. Yeah, that's better. It's just the edge that was a little too prominent for my taste. And let's actually mix that bottom into the lower section so it's less prominent. But I don't know if I'm fooling myself, and once it dries it'll make sense. To me it actually, I don't know, live it makes sense. It just looks a bit weird on camera. But let's let it dry and see what happens. I think it's gonna be okay. And to be honest with you, again, the beauty here comes from this section, the larger shapes and how they contrast. So this yellow and green contrasted with the sky and the blue, that's the real magic. This is kind of the background, right? You still want to get the most prominent small detail to look good, but you know, I think it looks decent actually. Now that I look at it again, I think it looks good. And I really like the way the road ended up looking unexpectedly nice. So yeah. So let me take a few questions as we wait for this to dry for that kind of last stage. I'm actually gonna move this so that you can see the painting without the skewing of the angle as much. Now it's a little more below the camera. Actually, I think if I do this, it'll help. Good. And let's take a few questions just to kind of move towards. I'm not going to conclude yet because maybe we'll do some final touches, though I don't think so. This looks much more saturated in real life. So once I scan it, I'll show you a proper one. You will see it. This is really strongly saturated. The camera kind of washes out the colors. So Richard, we answered that. Anupama says, I love how you made the background lighter and stand out in the wash. Yeah, that was really important. Richard says, thank you so much. You got it. John Haywood, how are you? Good morning from Connecticut, USA. Beautiful painting. Thank you so much. So I think now we're getting some people who are waking up in the US, right? It's super early, but still, if you're an early riser, then you'll be able to join. A couple of let's move towards wrapping up the painting process itself, and then we can go back and scan. I'm going to show you the final result. I think the main takeaway here is, again, focusing on large shapes, because if I'd start zooming in, like let me bring this, like this, blow it up larger. If I start to zoom in on every small detail and try to paint it individually, what ends up happening is a very overworked result. Too many brush marks. You shouldn't really see the brush marks. You should see the scene itself if possible, right? It's not always easy, but that's ideal, right? So that is important. Now, when you're working on a shape, a large shape, whether it's that first wash or a next wash, you still have some room for, you know, modifying, changing, wetting, wet and wet, charging, all of that. And if it's a second wash, you have even more freedom. So for example, this road ended up looking much better than I expected because I took the time to render out the shapes, right? Some of it is understanding the shapes, like understanding that if you have, and I can explain this, I didn't, but I mean, I could explain. So basically, if you look at it from a side section, you'll see that some parts of the road go up and some parts go down, right? Due to the collises of cars driving through. So this is where most cars drive through, so it goes a little down. And what happens is, the light comes from the right, so it will cast a shadow here. So this part's going to be in the shadow, and it's this cast shadow. That top part is going to be mid-value, and that right part is the most exposed to light is this. It's the lightest part, right? So what you see, this is a side section of what this looks like. So I can even draw on it, and it's okay. You see that it kind of goes up, flattens, and then goes down. Goes up, flattens, goes down, you see? If I do this, a bit of a side view of the road, you'll get something like this goes up, wraps around, goes down, straightens, up, around. And then, that's why the shadows cast here. Right? Shadows cast, this goes lighter, and this is mid-value. Mid-value. Maybe it's obvious for some, but I know it's not obvious for all, so I definitely want to show this. So it goes like this, down, up, and like that. So focusing on that nuance here in short is what got this section to look, in my opinion, really good. It leads us well into the painting. Sometimes you get lucky with a certain section, others don't work as well. But actually now the trees work well, in my opinion, too. The colors, of course, were very imaginative, were very different, but a couple of things I do like. Contrasting the blues with the warms, the reds and yellows. The sky's transition looks really good in my opinion, you see, and a lot of people are scared of, again, getting that green. Even here, when it initially looked a bit green and I changed a bit and started working on this section first and leaving that gap and filling it in with water, even there it doesn't look really green. So you don't have to be too worried. The one thing is, maybe don't mix pure blue with pure yellow, but have in the blue a bit muted and in the yellow have a bit of red, so that you'll avoid that maybe strong sun green in the sky, right? So this transition looks really good in my opinion. Other than that, I think the message is pretty clear. These drops, I don't know what I think about them. Not like the best decision, I think, but it ended up okay. Let me shut my phone, just put it on silent. So I think we're honestly done with the details. I don't want to add anything else. Even though I could here, or I could add some dry brush, some, you know what, some twigs we can add just a bit here and there. Let me see what we can do here, because I do see them. I mean, they are there, so maybe I'll add them in with a bit of purple and a bit of blue. And that'll be really the final touch, and then I can sign this. The house kind of painted itself, and I like the way it looks, so I'm not going to touch that. Now, you do want to, again, not go into overwork land, so keep this light and very sporadic, right? So I'm going to start here from the close ones. And this will just, you know, it will hint to the viewer that we're looking at some kind of foliage, right? Hopefully you can see this. Now, you don't want to add too little, because that's just going to look awkward, right? It's just, what is that? Why is that here? You want to spread them out, but then you need to know when to stop, right? I never have this problem of not knowing when to stop, really. If anything, sometimes I'm not sure what details to add, so I'm not with most people in this struggle, which I know a lot of people face. I don't know why. I've always been like that. Never cared too much about, you know, adding that many details, so I never end up overworking. Now, one thing to take in mind is perspective, right? The farther it gets, the smaller these twigs get, right? And have a variety of shape, you know, some are moving to the side, to the, you know, whatever. Have it in multiple directions, and I think we're good. I think we're getting to the point where we can stop soon. Maybe have a few stray ones go, you know, into the road, kind of like that. But you really don't need much here. That's kind of good, I think. It just gives the viewer something else to focus on here. And I'm going to sign this one, and then we'll give it a few more seconds to dry, and I'll scan it and show you the final result. Get a few final kind of questions, and then we'll move towards wrapping it up. I actually didn't have time to eat after working out, so that's definitely what I'm going to do here. As for signing, I try to avoid like a big focal point or a light area, so I'm just going to sign it here. One important advice I can give you about signing is you definitely want, and I know you can barely see it, sorry, you definitely want to avoid the sides. Don't go way to the side, because then once someone wants to frame it, they may end up cropping it out. So, you know, keep it closer to the center. And one thing I could do is sign this with my white gel pen. It will maybe show a little better in with the darker background. Sometimes I do that too. But here, let's keep it dark, like that. And hopefully you enjoy this one. As we start to wrap it up, let me know if you have any questions. We'll remove the tape, we'll scan it, don't worry. And hopefully you'll be fond of the end result here. I'm really bad at signing while filming, sorry. This is my signature. Anyway, let me dry this with a hairdryer real fast, and then we'll do some more chatting and remove the tape. Now, one of the challenges for me is how do I bring this same energy and analysis of the road to big areas like this, like foliage, like different, you know, that's going to be a challenge, and you'll find that you may have strength in one subject and less strength in another one. So just something to have in mind. And practice, work slowly on your weaknesses. Now let us remove the tape real fast. I'm gonna open up again my chat here. So we did the quick question, talked about this. Saint Inky, how are you? Just woke up and Liron's on the menu. Thank you so much for being here. John Haywood, please tell me what paper you're using. My paper buckles so much. Yeah, I'm using a Bao Hong, what is it called, University? The one that John got me, Academy. It's so good. This one. Thank you so much, John. You'll watch it afterwards and hopefully hear me say it. It's good, it's decent. The one thing that prevents buckling is proper taping. So if you tape it well enough, it won't, or it shouldn't buckle too badly on you. But sometimes it will buckle, and that's fine. You just work around that. It's a bit harder with larger pieces of paper, honestly. Every large painting I made, the paper buckled like crazy, and it was a bit challenging. Sometimes it may dry unevenly too because of the dips in paper. So one more thing to kind of watch out for. Maybe for larger pieces, stretch the paper. I never stretch it, but maybe that's a good idea, right? I'm not as experienced in larger pieces, so I may find that I do want to stretch it in the future. Richard, I'm so fortunate. I'm in a similar time zone to Israel. Yeah, that's fun. It is a close time zone, so it's most comfortable. I don't like in the Discord, I want to be more active, but I always, by the time I'm active, it's the middle of the day here and like middle of the night there, so it's really fun. Anupama Shah, will you be adding details to the grasses on the left? They're technically closest to the observer. So yeah, that'll be just the twigs we added, but nothing more than that. Jonathan Way, I guess the road helped you make the decision to really emphasize blow up the tree. Do you have any tips on choosing what to emphasize in a landscape? So when you look at the reference photo, honestly, there just isn't too much, I look at contrast, so I wanted to emphasize this contrast, shapes. But after you look at the big shapes, there will usually be like one detail you want to show properly. And here it's just that tree. Because the large shapes, the sky, the mountains, this here, the road, these are all, again, large areas, but within them you'll see one thing that sticks out. Now maybe in an alternate universe I'd go lighter on the trees and add all of the different tire tracks and more details here, right, to make this a little richer. Really is a matter of balance here. Sometimes you won't know for sure until you start painting, and then you'll end up emphasizing something which makes you not emphasize something else, because otherwise you'll have a lot of conflict of interest and focal points fighting over attention, right? So I would say at least have one or two things that are interesting for the viewer to look at. Like for me, it's this tree, of course the road and the mountains, but the tree and the houses here, just something to have them focus on, and many times there's no right decision. You just have to try and see what happens. We've come a long way from this little, I have a hair here, little thumbnail. Let me spit out the paint I may have eaten now. But yeah, so this was our initial thing, and then we decided to borrow some of the redness here. So I think we did quite a decent job here with editing those shapes. I actually like the tree here better, and it could be because the mountain ridge is darker, so the contrast is not as strong. Could be that. You got it, John. Let's see here. Oh, by the way, let me show you one really cool addition you can do here. So yeah, we talked about the grass, but let me show you one thing that always looks good in these kinds of scenes. That is adding a bit of opaque paint to mimic the flowers, because there are flowers here that look really good. So I completely forgot about that, and hopefully you're still here, everyone, to see this, because this is really fun. So you can do this with a white gel pen or a colorful gel pen, but I'll do it with my opaque paint here. So let's see, and it's gonna be, I'm gonna use my Joan Brilliant opaque watercolor paint. We're just gonna add a few of these and see what they look like, okay? And I see the flowers come in groups, so we'll have a group here, kind of randomly scattered about. Then we have another group there, and the farther the group is, the denser it's gonna look, because things are smaller, so the gaps between the flowers are also smaller, right? but you don't want to just keep those separate groups. You want to have some in between, right? And that can really help the final impression and make it look like flowers, you know. So yeah, something I completely forgot about. This is honestly easier to do with a pen, with an opaque paint kind of pen, but I like the way it looks better with watercolor. So we'll do it like this. And here you have some yellow flowers. And there are also some twigs here that are a little lighter, so that's another thing you can do. But honestly, just spread these out evenly. I could use some opaque yellow paint, but honestly, let's keep it simple. And try and keep it random. That's always a struggle to avoid patterns. The human brain is wired to find these patterns, you know. But look, you see, it gives it this softness. Nathan Dixon says, I tend to work very wet, so it always buckles even when I stretch, but you can always flatten when it's dry. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you just need that extra hairdryer time, and it will dry. More than if you would just leave it be. So just one more thing to maybe have in mind when you consider using a hairdryer, you know. At some point it can help reduce the final kind of persistent buckling, you know. So look at what happens here. Again, the closer we get, the farther the distances between the individual flowers are, and that can really help also mimic perspective. Perspective influences everything, not just human-made structures and buildings and stuff like that, but also flowers and trees. They're all affected by perspective one way or another. Again, that flattening, right? The farther these are, the more they're closer together and flatter they appear. So again, have that in mind too. Not always easy to, and you can do this just to smear some of them around if you feel like they're too strong. But I think we're getting to the point where it looks good. We can add a few more here and there. Like, you know what? No, we don't need them on the right side. We can maybe add a few here. That actually looks nice. Even though there's no green. Maybe a bit here, just to break off that pattern. And a bit into the distance. And I think that looks really good and kind of helps enhance the feeling, right? The thing with opaque paint, you just need to give it a bit more time to dry. So that's another thing to have in mind. So we may have to use the hairdryer once again. And then we had Saint Inky says same paper the guy from Cafe Watercolor uses. Oh, Eric also uses Bao. I do notice a lot of people have made a transition to Bao paper recently. I've been recommended by many people to try it out. So yeah, just heard him say it's just as good as Arch, if not better. I don't know if it's better than Arch, at least not what Arch used to be in the past. I prefer Arch, I think. But Saunders Waterford is my favorite, for sure, all time. Yeah, Anupama, yes, I wanted to suggest smattering some white for the flowers on the left grass. Yeah, cool. So one thing we can also do here is if these flowers feel too prominent, one small spray, and then you can do this, kind of erase some of them, make them less prominent. Give me 10 seconds to dry this, and then we'll scan it for you, and we'll see the final result, and then really wrap it up. So yes, Anupama, it's quite amazing, right? The flowers can suggest perspective. Who would have thought? So let me scan this. 1 second. You can't hear me from there. My apologies. I can try talking, but I don't think you'll hear me as well. So let's see. One other trouble I have with the Bao paper is that my scanner is almost large enough to scan the pieces of paper, but not so much. So there's always a small part that gets cropped out. Well, let me see here. 1 second. I'm gonna vent, color 300 dpi, scan. So let's see how it turns out. In the meantime, any final questions you have? well, we can get those. But yeah, this was a pretty prolific session, I have to say. So we started with these fun ones, and then we kind of made our way. And these studies, again, you can really throw them in the trash if you don't want them afterwards, but just the experience of going through them teaches you a lot. And you make the mistakes here so that you don't make them later on. Of course, you can't predict everything. Some mistakes will have to be made on the larger piece of paper, and that's totally fine. Okay, so I got the thing. I'm gonna save it to this live streams folder. There we go. Hopefully it's not too big of a file. I don't want it to make my computer crash while we stream, but if it does, my apologies. Yeah, there we go. Open it up with Photoshop. Big risk while streaming. Let's see here. I want to rotate it to orient it properly. Some small parts of it were cropped. You'll have to forgive me for that. I will post again, of course, on Instagram a bit of a better version, but I think the colors look really, really nice. So let me just adjust them a bit. Yeah. So what I'll show you now is just a closer look to what I'm looking at as it's in front of me. Okay. So let me bring that photo in. Image. I'm gonna move aside to make room for the scan. And let's see. There we go. Make it smaller. Of course, it will always open up pictures gigantic size on the screen. But this is what I got. This is what I'm looking at, and you can hopefully see the color nuances much, much better. I fixed the colors a bit just to make sure that they look somewhat close to the reference photo. If you look at a reference photo, here we go. Oops, sorry, muted myself. Let me know if you can't hear me now, but I think you should be able to. If you compare the reference photos side by side, there are quite a lot of differences, right? I emphasized a lot of the colors there. So to get from this to this, of course, some artistic liberties were taken. Notice how I put a lot more emphasis on the road by keeping some parts of it light. So that's just one thing to pay attention to. If I would have done anything differently, I'm wondering what would it be. I think a bit more of a nuance on the closer areas. Foliage is challenging, so I'm still learning, how to express things a little more accurately. Also, I got the timing a little off on the mountains in the left, so obviously things didn't. I went too dark, I think, honestly, so things stayed too much in place. I wanted them to blend a little more. Had I been cognizant of that at the right time, I could have sprayed some water, help it spread out. I do like the mountain ridge on the right. That's actually exactly how I envisioned it, stronger than the saturation in the photo. But yeah, overall, really nicely. The tree is gigantic. Also, it's like a huge tree. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Let me make everything small so I don't have to hide behind it. There we go. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the stream. Wanted to do something a little, again, different time. And I felt like I don't want to edit as many videos this week, so this doesn't require me to edit anything. More time to interact. It's much better. Samuso says, very nice. It's the kind of reference photo I would usually skip, and it reminds me to try more scenes like that. Yeah, definitely. Try it out. Pick one thing you want to show or put an emphasis on, and try and strive towards that, Yvonne says, great tutorial. Looking forward to the next one. Thank you so much. Jonathan, yeah, you can bring out a lot, and if you compare it again to where we started with these studies, that was just the start of an idea, right? But this is really all the study I need for a scene. This is what I'll usually do, right? Catherine, agree, ordinary reference and great painting. Thank you so much. Ian, that's so crazy how the different colors work out so well. Yeah, thank you so much. It's because, again, their sources are relatively similar. That's the one thing to have in mind. Keep your color palette minimal at first, so until you get some more experience. So just, French ultramarine, there we go. French ultramarine, phthalo blue, Indian yellow. I know you can barely see, but these colors, very basic. Quinacridone rose. Very basic colors if you just rely on those, and then add maybe a bit of that, May green to to give it a bit more of a punch. You can do so much with fewer colors. It's pretty amazing, and get the harmony that actually works. In this example, notice how when I used the phthalo green here, emerald, it really sticks out like a sore thumb. So I'm happy. That's one thing I would have maybe tried had I not given this first test run. So yeah. Catherine says, and thanks to Liron for Aussie friendly live stream from Visman. Thank you so much. Yeah, we can definitely make this like a recurring thing for sure, at least maybe once every 2 weeks. It just works better for everyone. You get to watch me live finally. I get to edit one less video a week, Oh, one more thing I do want to say about the orientation of the painting. The original reference photo is quite horizontal. You can use that to your advantage and use a longer piece of paper and paint an unusual format. That's always fun. If you can stretch it out and make it really fun and interesting, and there's a lot on the horizon people can look at and feel like they're looking at a panoramic view. That's one more thing to play around with, to make it more interesting. But it is a decision you have to make before you start painting, right? The size of paper, obviously. Saint Inky, how can someone hand out a token of appreciation for your hard work? Do you have a Patreon or similar? Thank you so much for making my life less boring. Yeah, you got it, Saint Inky. I do have a Patreon. I think you can find it in the channel, though I don't promote it too much. It honestly just means to provide people a way to donate. I don't make a big deal out of it. I don't do a lot of... I'll just link to it so I can find it. I don't really provide too many perks. Because it's just very time consuming. So my apologies about that if you're expecting something that is a little more polished. The one thing I do is include your name at the end of videos. I'm going to post a link in the chat. Patreon. So thank you so much for that. Patreon. Yeah. So what happened was I ended up removing my Patreon at some point, and then people were emailing like, how can I donate? So I was like, okay, I'll bring the Patreon back, but I just won't market it too much. So thank you so much. And also, just if you get any course, if you want to learn how to, paint looser in watercolor, let go, enjoy the process, I have the frustration-free watercolor course. The link is in the description, first link in the description. So that's a good way to support me as well. And you get to study for my course, but if you already took it, so thank you so much. And get a book on Amazon. I have a bunch of them, more on drawing and sketching. So yeah, thank you so much. That's amazing. To be able to help and get that support from people. Jason Coombe Watercolor says, hello all, another Aussie here from Tasmania. Cool, that's super cool. I'm happy we really got the time zone down. That's really nice. Alessandro, how are you? A bit of a different time, so the usual audience may have a harder time to join in, but of course you'll be able to watch this after the fact. Jonathan says, thanks from Seoul. Oh, cool. May Road says, thanks to Ron, I love to see how you work watercolor. Thank you so much. Josephine, I do a lot of plein air in Niagara, so I really appreciate it when you do a landscape. I'm going back to sleep now. Plein airs are awesome, especially in landscapes. I hope to do more plein air soon. But in case, I think it's a good time to wrap it up. I want to thank you so much for being here, everyone. I really appreciate it, and I wanted to do something a little, again, different time. We'll make this a regular occurrence at least every, 2 to 3 weeks. I have to really. And let me know if you're watching this after the fact, whether you're from Australia or India or anywhere else, Korea, or US, of course, Europe. Let me know in a comment what else you'd like me to cover in the live streams, because I always try to, keep it aimed towards the things that interest you. So definitely looking forward to hearing from you. And yep, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for being here. And I will talk to you again on Thursday's live stream. We're going to have another live stream. So 2 live streams a week. So yeah, someone says, love the time. 6:45 here in Taiwan. Cool. Yeah, I'm so happy. It ended up really working out nicely. So take care. And until the next time, I'm going to see you on Thursday's live. Normal hour. So some of you will have to watch it after the fact. My apologies. But yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.